before we begin this next story, I'll be using some strong language in order to convey the account of what's happened, so apologies if you're offended. But the Labour leader of Hertfordshire Borough Council has described those that put up the St George's flag and the Union flag on lampposts as a bunch of criminals, extremists and nonces. Jeremy Newmark made these comments about Operation Raise the Colours in response to Tory councillor Brett Rosehill's question. Take a listen.
Do you accept that by constantly linking our national flag to extremism, as you did in the question, or the answer to the question, as well as many Labour MPs at the moment, that you run the risk of letting extremists define it instead of reclaiming it for the mainstream?
Thank you, Councillor Rosehill. Councillor Newmark, please.
Thank you for your question, Councillor Rosehill, and I'm sorry, but I'm not playing. I won't be taking lectures on our national flag and extremism from a councillor that has the audacity to speak in almost glowing terms in his question to this council about Operation Raise the Colours. Operation Raise the Colours. An organised and orchestrated attempt by a bunch of criminals, extremists, nonces, to hijack our national flag.
I still cannot believe he even said that. Well, joining me now is the founding member of the Operation Raise the Colours movement, Elliott, Stanley. Elliott, welcome to the show. You've been down to see us in Westminster here, and I spoke with you at great length, and I know that what you do means you get a lot of abuse. You're well used to being called a Nazi, you're well used to being called a fascist and a racist, but to be called a nonce by a Labour councillor, that's a new low.
Well, it's an outrage. We're deeply distressed by it. We're family people. We're going out. He's essentially putting a target on our back. And I cannot fathom how we can be called nonces for displaying our beautiful flag on lampposts. I mean, is this the best way the left can articulate themselves, by calling, people that we're not right wing, we're just centrists, but by calling us horrendous words? It's deeply distressing. My family could be a target now because of the words of this councillor. Words have consequences. As poor Charlie Kirk has found out. It's just completely unacceptable to be banding these horrendous words and around willy-nilly as they are. It's deeply distressing.
Now, Elliott, I can tell you're greatly moved by this, and I don't blame you. Perhaps the councillor doesn't understand what he's doing, but you and I know that that's one of the worst things you can call somebody, particularly in working class areas of Britain. It's a terrible, terrible smear to call anybody a nonce. It's perhaps one of the worst things you could possibly call them. In many ways, it's worse than being called a racist or a fascist. We have to call for calm, don't we? You have to send a message to Jeremy Newmark saying, stop this offensive language. As you said, words have consequences.
Absolutely. I mean, well, if I was him, I'd think I'd be considering my position now, to be honest with you. I think that, he should do the right thing and fall on his sword. It's an outrage that he would be prepared to use such defamatory words in a public forum. And he really does need to consider his position, because I'm sure that he's not the type of he's not the type of person that that borough would want representing them.
And Elliott, Stanley, what's the reaction been within the Operation Raise the Colours community to this astonishing outburst?
Well, it's only come to light in the last few hours, and everybody is absolutely horrified by it, understandably. It's, as you just pointed out, Martin, I can't think of anything that would be more defamatory than being called a nonce. It's, as I said, I'm a proud father of 4 children. All of us as a collective, we're all fathers, we've all got children, and now we're going out all over the weekend to keep putting more flags up. And what's the reaction? What are we to expect? Are we going to be called? People are going to be driving past calling us names, or potentially worse. It's not a big leap now to call for violence against us.
Okay. Elliott, Stanley, I'm afraid I have to stop you there. We're running out of time, but I really appreciate you coming on today. I know it's been very moving for you to do so. Thank you. Now, we approached the Labour Party and councillor Jeremy Newmark, who made these astonishing comments, for a reply. but neither of them have got back to us yet. I would extend again, as I did in the last hour, please do get back to us. We'd love to hear why you thought this was a good idea. Now, the Prime Minister is under yet more pressure as a poll out today has shown that people are not backing the Prime Minister whatsoever. And new polling from Electoral Calculus also reveals that Reform have an 18 percentile lead over the Labour Party. Well, I'm joined in the studio by the founder of Electoral Calculus, Martin Baxter. Martin, always an absolute pleasure. So first of all, let's get to an exclusive poll we done for GB News on Sir Keir Starmer's leadership and the public's faith in him. It's not looking very good.
Good afternoon, Martin. We asked the public a simple question: should Keir Starmer remain as Prime Minister or resign? And over the whole public, 54% said he should resign, 20% said he should stay, and the rest didn't know. So as a majority of the public think he should go. But obviously that includes his political opponents, Conservative and Reform supporters and other parties. Also, more interestingly, we looked at what Labour voters, people who voted Labour in 2024, said. They were obviously much more enthusiastic about Keir Starmer, but only to a degree. 50% on our figures, 50% of Labour voters thought Keir Starmer was the right man for the job as Prime Minister. 26% didn't know, were scratching their heads a bit, wondering, maybe, maybe not. And 24% of Labour voters thought he should resign. So only about half of Labour voters have confidence in Keir Starmer as Prime Minister, which is, it's not the worst figures it could be, but it's not very good figures. So it establishes or reaffirms the fact that Keir Starmer is not so popular with the public or indeed with Labour Party voters.
54% saying he should go. If it's 52% like Brexit, you'd probably say, let's have 3 votes and go again and campaign for 3 years against it. I digress. It's grim reading for him. It sincerely is. Meanwhile, a new poll out today from Find Out Now has Reform with a record 18 points clear of the Labour Party on 34%. But Martin Baxter, what you do so wonderfully for us here at GB News, you combine across the week's polls to get a more accurate figure. What does that show us?
Yes, we like this. Yes, this Find Out Now poll shows a Reform lead of 18%. We think it's a little more helpful to take an average of recent polls, including that Find Out Now poll, but also polls by other pollsters. We find not a similar picture, frankly. A Reform lead of 12%, which is still very big historical terms. We've got on the poll of polls Reform on 32%, Labour behind on 19, less than 20, and the Conservatives on 17%. And when we translate that into seats, that's a whopping majority for Nigel Farage's Reform UK party, 403 seats we calculate, which would be a Reform majority of 156, bigger than Tony Blair and Keir Starmer last year. Labour less than 100 seats on 93. Liberals on 62 and the Conservatives reduced to 5th place on 27.
That's actually a lot better than the Find Out Now poll. It had the Labour Party on 44 seats. That's just extinction level event.
If it were, if it were an 18% lead, and it might be, Find Out Now might be right on that. If it were, that would be terrible for Labour. But even taking the, doing the grown-up thing and looking at the average rather than just a single poll, it still looks awful for Labour and very good for Reform at the moment.
And Martin Baxter, as well as amalgamating this week's polls, and by the way, I thought what was fascinating about this week's poll, particularly the Find Out Now poll, the polling was carried out during the state visit. Now, ordinarily, you'd expect there to be a polling boost for a premier, hosting a president, the pomp, the pageantry, Windsor Castle. That hasn't happened for Keir Starmer. So far, there's been no upward tick in him being seen as an international statesman.
Yes, so far that's the case. I mean, it could be that amongst Labour voters or centre-left voters, Donald Trump is not perhaps the most popular American president, so a big meeting with him maybe doesn't play so well with the public. Although Keir Starmer, on the whole, had a fairly good 2 days. Nothing went wrong, so diplomatically it was successful, but politically it may not have achieved very much.
But it is fascinating to consider that perhaps hobnobbing with a man that a lot of Labour voters, let's be frank, probably don't like very much, could potentially backfire, and it might not gel with people who vote Reform. They might not necessarily believe that Keir Starmer's heart is in it. Martin, you've got a third graphic for us now, one I find the most fascinating in many ways. This is the geographical split. If we look at the electoral map of if your poll of polls became real, look at that. It's a turquoise tidal wave. Talk us through it.
Yes, well, as you say, a lot of the light blue of Reform sweeping the country through the red wall in the north, even the northern urban areas like Liverpool and Manchester and into Yorkshire, through the Midlands and indeed large chunks of the south. Only sort of central London remains as a Labour stronghold, and the SNP obviously doing better in Scotland on these figures. Reform are doing quite well in Scotland, but not enough to take a lot of seats yet.
And what's really fascinating, there was a by-election in Cardiff overnight, and Cardiff is down as a die-hard Labour seat. They slipped 31 percentile in Cardiff. Reform put on 39%. Cardiff has gone to Reform award there for the first time ever. We're seeing Plaid Cymru doing well, but really the Conservatives being forced out. Labour Party, once again, the pattern we see week in, week out, Martin Beck. So Labour being forced back into city centres, into university towns, and the provinces being swept by that turquoise tidal wave. Martin Baxter, thank you as ever for joining us and bringing us fully up to speed. Always a pleasure to have your company. Thank you.